Hey guys, tonight we haul our tired, sea-sprayed selves across a wind-bitten finger of medieval Iceland. Boots crunching on lava gravel while Atlantic gusts smack your cheeks pink. You probably won't survive this trek without chapped lips or without a sip of something questionably stored in a puffin's former stomach. But more on that in a moment. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious who's drifting off in Dubai and who's wide awake in Des Moines. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge onward beneath a sky the color of beaten pewter, clouds skimming so low that entrepreneurial ravens hitch free rides on the wind shear. Ahead, a turf-roofed farmstead huddles against black basalt outcrops, smoke curling from a stone chimney like a lazy ribbon. The air tastes of brine and peat, but another, sharper note threads between a sour, almost cheesy tang you can't quite place. Joke one drifts through your mind. You hadn't ordered room service, yet the breeze clearly upsold you on a complimentary dairy sampler. Mainstream historical fact: by the early 13th century, Icelandic farmers routinely dug out roomy cellars beneath these turf homes to store barrels of skyr, a thick cultured milk still beloved today. But skyr alone couldn't tame the tidal wave of summer milk their shaggy cows and hardy ewes produced during endless daylight. Without glass, refrigeration, or even enough coopers to make barrels for every drop, they leaned into creative desperation. A shaggy sheepdog greets you, tail wagging like a metronome set to saga tempo. Its breath puffs tiny clouds that vanish into the salt air as you crunch over threshold stones into a dim interior. The farm wife, her braids tucked under a rabbit fur cap, waves you toward a bench beside a roaring driftwood fire. She ladles milk from an iron cauldron into a wooden trough, swirling it to skim off the newest cream. Quirky tidbit slides in. Island folklore warned that leaving fresh milk unattended would invite Hulda folklore's hidden people to steal its fat. So many farmers sang off-key lullabies while churning just to keep invisible trespassers bored enough to wander elsewhere. You trade smiles, and she hands you a clay cup. The liquid inside is warm, frothy, still sweet, fresh from the cow an hour ago. Soon you'll watch this same milk embark on a bizarre metamorphosis, swapping its cozy vessel for something avian. But first she gestures toward a bundle hanging from the rafters. It resembles a string of greyish sausages, lumpy and matte. These, she confides, are dehydrated puffin stomachs, cleaned, smoked over sheep dung, and ready to become nature's oddest milk flasks. Joke 2 bubbles up. Somewhere a puffin union is drafting a strongly worded complaint. You step back outside, nostrils tingling from peat smoke and sour whey. Beyond the farmstead, cliffs rise like serrated knives against the sky. In midsummer, seabirds blanket those cliffs, guillemots, fulmars, and thousands of puffins nesting in burrows. Harvesters climb with rope slings and fishbone hooks, plucking birds for meat and, more importantly, for their remarkably elastic gizzards and stomach linings. Historians still argue whether these harvests were sustainable genius or early overexploitation, but medieval Icelanders saw the cliff bounty as insurance against volcanic ash-blighted crops. Your guide hands you sealskin boots studded with whalebone cleats, necessary for clambering the guano-slick ledges tomorrow. For tonight, though, you settle into a hay-stuffed mattress beneath a roof that thrums under wind-driven drizzle. The farm shrugs against the storm like a stubborn ram. You meanwhile nurse a second cup of warm milk, mentally preparing for cliff acrobatics. Joke 3 whispers in your ear. You signed up for bedtime history, not an extreme sports dairy tour, but here we are. As darkness creeps over the horizon, though darkness is generous in Icelandic summer, you catch faint bleats from a sod corral and the rhythmic splash of waves beyond the pasture. The tangy scent intensifies each time the door opens, reminding you that tomorrow's milk will bypass wooden barrels for bird bellies. You wonder how anyone first decided a puffin pouch might be a respectable milk jug. Perhaps desperation breeds brilliance, or questionable snack experiments. The farm wife's oldest son pokes the peat fire and tells you, in a low voice, that some neighbors swear seabird stored milk carries the bird's coastal magic, protecting households from sea trolls. Mainstream fact again, coastal Icelandic communities blended Norse mythology with local folk beliefs, forging a spiritual landscape where trolls, elves and vengeful sea spirits coexisted with Christian saints. Whether divine or microbial, the milk in puffin stomachs didn't spoil for months, even amid freezing winters and volcanic ashfall. You drift towards sleep, as rain drips from sod eaves, the farmyard dog barking at phantom shadows. Tomorrow you'll scramble cliffs, pluck stomachs and watch milk turn sour under curious alchemy. For now, let the fire's crackle stitch you into the straw mattress and dream of puffins dive-bombing waves, unaware their bellies will become medieval thermoses by sunrise. You wake to a thin glow sneaking through the turf roof, the sun staging its half-hearted rise at 3 in the morning, and the farm's rooster having already screamed himself hoarse. Outside, the air feels sharp enough to etch glass. You step from the longhouse doorway into ankle-high fog and immediately sense why medieval Icelanders learned to hoard every crumb and curd. The land itself is an overgrown rock garden engineered by mischievous volcanoes. Warm seasons are short, pastures patchy, and barley harvests fail often enough to make bread feel like birthday cake. You tramp along a sheep path, slick with dew and volcanic grit, each footfall puffing up tiny puffs of black sand, an accidental reminder that much of this island came straight from molten chaos. Mainstream historical fact: eruptions like Eldgjá in the 930s and Hekla in 1104 blanketed farms with ash, choking fields and forcing families to reinvent dinner via ingenious preservation. The farmwife waves you toward a low stone shed. Inside, slabs of wind-dried mutton hang beside twisted ropes of cod, both destined to taste like ocean-flavored leather by December. She points to wooden tubs of hrútsponga, pickled ram testicles, and casks of soured whale blubber, politely nicknamed sea butter. Quirky tidbit: sagas claim some thrifty homesteaders pressed these delicacies into sheep stomachs, coated them in rancid butter, and buried the whole thing in a bog, trusting peat acidity to keep spoilage at bay until Christmas feasts. You try to look impressed, joke one surfaces. When refrigeration is a distant dream, you apparently make peace with the world's strangest charcuterie board. You follow her to an open field where the grass wears a tired shade of green, dotted with moss and miniature lupine. Flocks of hardy ewes graze on the sparse blades, their bellies swelling with milk under endless daylight. Every bucketful reminds you of a ticking clock. Fresh milk sours within hours, if not churned, boiled or fermented. Wooden butter tubs and skin bags fill quickly, yet with barley scarce and vegetables a rumour, throwing away milk is unthinkable. Historians still argue whether Iceland's harsh ecology spurred an unrivaled mastery of dairy chemistry or merely forced folks to masquerade austerity as cuisine. Either way, ingenuity bubbles up with every burp of fermenting whey. You help guide a shaggy cow toward a crude pen, her hooves drum-thumping like dull snares on basalt. Milking begins. Warm streams hiss against a wooden pail, and you feel the subtle panic farmers must have felt as another gallon accumulates. Where will this go? The Skyer barrels groan under last week's haul, and nobody wants to churn more butter during haymaking. Cue the cliffside solution: puffin stomachs conveniently elastic, watertight, and when smoked over sheep dung, strong enough to corral milk through 5-month subarctic darkness. Joke 2 whispers: puffins never signed up to moonlight as Tupperware, yet here we are. A teenage herder jogs past with a runic tally stick, notching each cow's output so the farm's milk tithe to the local chieftain remains mathematically honest. Mainstream fact: Icelandic law codes, Gragas, required farmers to render dairy dues in butter or sky, forging an economy where cream equaled currency. Shortfalls risked fines or exile. Surplus deposits like seabird bag milk were a hedge against both famine and feudal accountants. You imagine an auditor sniffing a puffin pouch to verify its worth and joke 3 flaps in: "Sir, your net assets smell delightfully fishy." As midday drifts closer, the sky clears just long enough to reveal volcanic peaks smouldering innocently in the distance. The farmwife hands you a strip of wind-dried haddock, its edges curling like parchment. She explains that coastal kin sometimes stashed milk in dried cod bladders if puffin hunts went poorly. You bite the haddock, salty, chewy, faintly sweet, and wash it down with lukewarm whey siphoned from an oak keg. The flavor combo is memorable, yet your stomach rebels less than expected. Survival pedigree apparently trains taste buds for gratitude. Nearby, a sod-covered pit yawns open. It's lined with flat stones and smells of damp earth and faint vinegar. This is the winter pantry, where today's milk-filled bird stomachs will hibernate. Layered above last season's stash are chunks of fermented shark, harkal, still off-gassing ammonia like a polite chemical weapon. Quirky tidbit: farmers believed storing shark atop milk pouches imparted ocean spirit that protected contents from evil weather spirits, an early attempt at gastronomic feng shui. You picture future scholars grim-faced, scraping crusty residues in sterile labs, deciding whether ocean spirit equals halophilic bacteria. The farmwife's husband arrives with a yoke across his shoulders, pails of frothy milk sloshing. He tips one pail into a cauldron, sprinkles rennet collected from a calf's stomach, and stirs with a driftwood paddle. Curds nod into being. All the while, the couple exchange quick calculations: how much to churn, how much to share with neighbors, how many puffin pouches they'll need. Historians still argue whether this microeconomy of sharing fermented dairy created stronger social bonds or sowed jealousy between households. For you, the math is simple. More milk today equals risk and opportunity tomorrow. You return to the longhouse for a midday break. The smoky interior hums with activity. Children twist sheep wool into yarn, elders mend fishing nets, and everyone periodically skims a wooden bowl of sour milk. The taste is funky but oddly comforting, like edible nostalgia. Someone cracks a joke about puffins filing a grievance at the next Althing assembly. Laughter ricochets off soot-black beams. You chuckle too, remembering our earlier promise of gentle sarcasm. Outside, seabirds circle the cliffs, screeching as if advertising their forthcoming role in the dairy industry. The farmwife hands you a coiled hemp rope and gestures toward the sea-sprayed horizon. Cliff time. You tuck dried fish into a satchel and pull your hood against spitting rain. Your legs feel the weight of volcanic earth, yet curiosity tugs harder. Soon you'll see how a bird's innards transform into winter insurance, an alchemy of need, nerve, and a dash of mischievous daring. A final gust rattles the roof as you step back into daylight, pockets stuffed with cheese curds to fuel the climb. Puffin bellies await, and so does the peculiar satisfaction of turning scarcity into survival. You square your shoulders against the wind, letting the tang of sour milk hang on the air like a promise of odd adventures ahead. You trudge along a narrow sheep trail until pasture becomes scree. Scree becomes jagged basalt, and suddenly you're staring up at a sheer sea cliff glazed with guano, like a gargantuan chalkboard someone forgot to erase. The Atlantic booms far below, waves battering stone ledges into fizzing lace. You tighten the hemp rope around your waist, checking knots the way a cautious toddler fingers shoelaces. One misstep, and you'll star in Iceland's shortest saga. You probably won't survive this, your inner narrator mutters, half serious. Joke one perks up. At least the splash would rinse off the sour milk perfume you've been cultivating. Your guide drives an iron piton fashioned from drift iron, because smelting ore here is a luxury, into a fissure and gestures for you to follow. You plant whalebone cleats into footholds, thighs trembling like unset sky. A riot of cries erupts overhead. Puffins, fulmars and kittiwakes swirl in frenetic loops, their wings thrumming the salt air. Mainstream historical fact: seabird colonies on Iceland's Westman archipelago and northern cliffs supplied medieval households with meat, eggs, down, and yes, handy internal organs sturdy enough to become wild-crafted canteens. Some families even paid farm rents in cured puffins, legal tender with beaks attached. You edge sideways to a natural ledge where white splatters glisten like abstract art. Slick, yes, but beneath lies a crusty traction layer. Your boots stick as though the mountain itself wants you anchored. The guide produces a Y-shaped hook whittled from walrus tusk. He loops it under a nesting puffin, lifts the bird gently, and with practiced speed slips a cloth bag over its head to calm it. Fringe tidbit: seasoned climbers whispered a lullaby in mock Latin, claiming puffins fell drowsy to ecclesiastical tones. You give it a try, Dominus flappus puffius, and the bird merely blinks unimpressed. Joke 2 chuckles. You've ruined any chance at an honorary choir position. With deft fingers he harvests a few birds and places them in a sealskin sack, to be dispatched and cleaned back at camp. But today isn't just about meat. It's about turning Mother Nature's gizzards into medieval thermoses. He removes a scalpel fashioned from sharpened reindeer antler and demonstrates a neat incision along the abdomen of a freshly culled puffin, exposing the greyish-pink stomach pouch. The organ looks rubbery, surprisingly thick, and after rinsing, remarkably watertight. Historians still argue whether Norse settlers learned this trick from earlier Celtic hermits who once inhabited these coasts, or whether desperate Icelanders discovered the puffin pouch hack entirely on their own. Either way, it's equal parts resourceful and eyebrow-raising. Wind gusts whip your cloak as you kneel to imitate the process. Warm entrails steam in the cold air, and you rinse the harvested pouch with seawater from a wooden ladle. The salt helps purge fishy odors and acts as a crude preservative. You hang the clean stomach on a driftwood peg hammered into the rock, letting the North Atlantic breeze pre-dry it. Beneath your feet, thousands of nesting birds churn like living confetti, an endless supply of potential milk bottles, though sustainability wasn't a medieval buzzword. The cliff smells of iodine, ammonia, and distant promise of cheese. Farther along, the guide points to a fulmar nest, larger birds that spit rancid stomach oil when threatened. He advises caution: the oil mats feathers, ruins wool, and legend warns, curses dinner guests with endless hiccups. You decide puffins will suffice. Another climber waves from a higher perch, dropping a string of stomach pouches into a leather sling. Like grotesque holiday ornaments, they sway against basalt. Joke 3 pipes up. Martha Stewart never covered guano chick decor. By midday, the collection bag bulges with organs, each destined for a quick smoke above smouldering sheep-dung fire. This evening, the guide signals for descent. You rappel carefully, hands slick with mixed bird grease and sea spray, grateful for the rope's taut reassurance. At the base, you plant feet in coarse black sand, heart hammering. The ocean stretches steel blue to the horizon, while seabirds wheel overhead, free of their interior real estate. Back at the farmstead, family members greet the hall with nods of practiced approval. They don gloves stitched from lambskin and set to work, stomachs soaked briefly in a stone basin of hot whey, then slathered with coarse salt scraped from tidal pools. The farm wife threads each pouch onto a driftwood rack above a low, smoky fire of dried dung and kelp. The pungent smoke infuses antibacterial phenols and a flavor locals call scarf ilmer, literally cormorant scent. Whether that's an endorsement or warning remains unclear. Mainstream fact slips in. Smoke drying food not only imparts flavor but binds phenolic compounds to proteins, extending shelf life. Medieval Icelanders applied this to fish, mutton, and evidently seabird stomachs. Fringe tidbit emerges. Some daring gourmands stuffed pouches first with crushed angelica root, believing the herb warded off plague and marital arguments. The herb infused the milk later, providing a faint licorice kick. Evening fog slides over the valley, as finished pouches, now leathery and dark gold, are ready to fill. Fresh milk still steams in wooden tubs. One by one, family members pour warm milk through a funnel made from a ram's horn, inflating bird bellies like biological water balloons. A strip of dried sinew ties each neck closed. They'll expand fractionally as fermentation begins, creating internal pressure rivaling a small bellows. You heft a filled pouch. It feels like a lumpy football, sloshing softly. A teen cousin jokes that if you punt it wrong, the harpies get free yogurt. You grin, wiping dew from your beard. Stomachs filled, the family parades to the storage pit. Stones are pried aside, revealing layers of last year's stash, now well ripened. Fresh pouches nestle in niches between shark fillets. Stone lids slide back, sealing away tomorrow's breakfasts and midwinter lifesavers. You inhale the pit's earthy chill, noting aromas of tangy dairy, briny fish, and something reminiscent of old gym socks left by Vikings. Appetite is a flexible thing when blizzards prowl. The farm wife claps her hands, inviting everyone inside for supper. As you cross the threshold, twilight lingers in hazy lavender hues. A bowl of yesterday's fermented puffin milk awaits, thick like thinned yogurt, sour sweet with a hint of smoky kelp. You steel yourself, sip, and taste bright salt, grassy cream, and distant fish echoes, surprisingly pleasant. Historians still argue whether medieval Icelandic palates genuinely relished this flavor, or simply tolerated it as the price of survival, but tonight you find the tang strangely comforting, like edible campfire memories. Beneath the rafters, laughter bubbles as someone recounts a saga of a chieftain who once hurled a spoiled pouch at a rival, sparking a feud resolved only after 3 sheep and 10 puffin beaks changed hands. You lean back, cheeks warm, content in the glow of peat embers and communal ingenuity. Outside, seabirds settle for the night, unaware their vacated bellies now cradle winter's milk. Scarcity breeds creativity. You muse, and sometimes that creativity tastes like sour ocean thunder, but it keeps you alive, and that's flavor enough. Sunrise never truly left. It merely ducked behind the horizon for a catnap, and now it creeps back, smudging gold across the pasture grass like melted candle wax. You step outside to find dew gems glittering on each blade, the landscape so bright it feels personally sponsored by the sun. Icelandic summer daylight is a hyperactive toddler, sleep optional, stretching 20 hours and daring you to keep pace. The cows don't mind. They graze with the slow confidence of animals convinced the buffet will never close, udders ballooning until they resemble cream-filled bellows tied onto sturdy shaggy frames. Joke 1 pops in. If cows wore Fitbits, they'd log 10,000 chews by breakfast. Down by the stream, ewes mutter while twin lambs frolic around their ankles, occasionally butting the udders that sustain their boundless energy. Each sheep sports a coat as ragged as volcanic cliffs, coloured in creamy whites or storm cloud greys that match the churn's future contents. Mainstream historical fact: Iceland's indigenous cattle and sheep, descendants of Norse stock, ferried over in open boats adapted to subsist on sparse Arctic vegetation, producing milk rich in butterfat but prone to surplus during endless daylight. Farmers counted on this glut to survive the equally endless winter dark, but in midsummer that abundance borders on comedic tsunami. You shoulder a wooden yoke with 2 copper-bound buckets, wincing as fresh milk sloshes. Inside the longhouse, yesterday's churning marathon, already stacked barrels of new butter against soot-black walls. A teenage nephew groans, twisting the final turn of the dasher, like a knight finishing the world's slowest duel. The churn lid pops, revealing a mound of golden fat bobbing in buttermilk soup. Somewhere beneath that creamy summit lies a second, deeper problem: no more storage barrels. Historians still argue whether medieval Iceland's chronic scarcity of coopers spurred earlier adoption of sheep stomachs, seawater brining, or puffin pouch innovation, but whatever the cause, wooden containers remain rarer than a sunny February. The farm wife calls you over to the dairy bench, where she ladles frothy milk into oval wooden troughs cooled by a gurgling spring, channeled through turf pipes. Each trough fills alarmingly fast, threatening to overflow like a toddler's bathtub. You grab a slotted spoon and skim thick cream into horn jars, but even so, liquid climbs toward the rim. Quirky tidbit bursts forth. Some farms supposedly let family cats lap excess milk right off the dairy floor, claiming feline paws blessed the churn for smoother butter. Their cats naturally embraced sainthood with sticky whiskers and shameless purrs. Beyond the corral, small hayfields ripple in the breeze. Men and women wield scythes, slicing through coarse grass that will become winter fodder. Every armful counts. Without enough hay, cows must be culled or milked less next spring. You inhale the scent of cut grass mixed with distant sea salt, a perfume that screams fleeting abundance. Up the hillside, you notice racks of drying fish skins whipping in the breeze beside last evening's bird stomach pouches. Everything here dries, smokes, or ferments because time and volcanic ash seldom grant second chances. A chorus of moos interrupts your reverie. Another cow arrives for milking, teetering as if she swallowed a water barrel. You squat on a 3-legged stool, press your forehead against her warm flank, and begin rhythmic squirts into the pail. Milk drums the wood like spurting drumsticks. Your hands soon ache, but the pail brims nonetheless. Joke 2 surfaces. In Iceland, the phrase crying over spilled milk probably originated as a pragmatic weather report. When buckets overflow, you hurry them inside, but even the stone cellar is packed. Some barrels slosh ominously if you bump them, tiny tidal waves inside oak walls. The farm wife mutters that this year's yield could drown half the parish if rains flood the cellar. She eyes a row of smoked puffin pouches cooling by the hearth. Today's new strategy: Each pouch holds perhaps half a litre, mere thimbles next to bucket loads, yet every vessel counts when winter's spectre lurks behind even the brightest midsummer cloud. Her husband suggests sky-making to thin the fluid tide. Wooden tubs are laced with rennet, and fresh milk gets poured over yesterday's starter culture, a dollop of sour curd saved precisely for this avalanche moment. Soon curds separate, and whey collects below. Curds become protein-packed skyr. Whey transforms into soured drink, mysa, beloved for quenching thirst during haying. Historians still argue whether medieval Icelanders relished whey or merely tolerated it to avoid wasting nutrients, but the collective burps after each gulps hint at grudging affection. Outside, wool-clad children roll a cured puffin pouch across the grass, giggling as sloshing milk inside gurgles. They toss it like a primitive football until it bursts a tiny leak. The farmwife screeches and confiscates the squishy toy, patching the puncture with a strip of lamb intestine. Quirky tidbit: some families stitch decorative runes onto pouches, believing carved leather charms discourage spoilage spirits. Others added carved wooden stoppers shaped like mythic sea monsters to scare away moldfolk. Science meets imaginative art. The sun climbs higher, yet shadows remain faint in the endless glow. You wipe sweat with a sleeve crusted in dried butter flecks and glance toward the cliff. Tomorrow's harvest beckons again. For now you lean against a turf wall, sipping chilled whey flavored with angelica stems. Joke 3 meanders in. No coffeehouse chain will ever market puffin stomach latte, but maybe they should. Protein, probiotics, and an Icelandic sense of adventure all in one questionable container. Evening approaches, though light barely fades. The pasture still hums with chewing bovines, their stomachs churning grass into tomorrow's milky flood. The farm wife counts full pouches, 12 today, then stares at the remaining buckets, sighing. "We need more birds," she mutters, half to herself. You realize each summer day repeats this dance, milk rising like a tidal chart, containers scrambling to keep up, innovation surfacing like kelp after a storm. Mainstream fact: archaeological digs at medieval Icelandic farm sites reveal layers of burnt dung ash, fish bones, and dairy residue, painting a stubborn portrait of people who turned any organic scrap into preservation magic. You help haul the last churn of butter into a spirit-cooled root cellar, stacking it beside ancient cheeses that smell like philosophical arguments. The door creaks shut, blocking out barnyard symphonies. Your body hums with fatigue, but satisfaction thrums deeper, like you've waltzed with scarcity and still managed to lead. A sliver of not quite night settles over the valley, lending the land an expensive silver glow. Tomorrow promises another marathon of milk, but for now you breathe in the sweet grassy aroma drifting from the pasture, grateful the cows haven't learnt to pace their output. Back inside, embers glow red in the hearth. You ladle a tiny bowl of fresh skyr, drizzle it with wind-dried blueberry syrup, and let the tangy spoonful linger. Milk may threaten to drown the world, but tonight it tastes like victory. You stretch beside the fire, eyelids drooping, and let the endless daylight fade into soft blur as you plan your next step in Iceland's dairy chess match. Somewhere outside, a butter-fed cat purrs like distant thunder, guarding tomorrow's churn. You smile, thinking scarcity can be delicious, so long as you have a puffin pouch handy. You kneel on a flat basalt slab beside the longhouse wall, while the family arranges yesterday's puffin harvest for surgery. The morning smells like equal parts sea brine and sheep dung smoke, an odd perfume you've started associating with progress. A stout wooden trough, filled with warm whey steams at your feet, ready for its role as makeshift sanitizer. The guide you climbed with yesterday sharpens an antler blade on a pumice stone. Sparks would fly if metal met flint, but bone against volcanic glass only sighs. Joke 1 surfaces. You suddenly envy modern zip-top bags. No feathers, no guts, no cliffside acrobatics required. He places the first puffin on a board, thanks it in soft Icelandic, and makes a practiced incision along the belly, feathers and down part to reveal slick pinkish tissue glistening like polished quartz. With 2 deft pincers, whale baleen repurposed into tools, he teases out the stomach and gizzard intact, severing connective threads with minimal spillage. Mainstream historical fact: medieval sagas mention Fuglapokar, not only for milk but for storing herb-steeped lard used as lamp fuel. Puffin stomachs, it seems, moonlighted as batteries for light as well as lunch. You cradle the pouch in gloved hands, surprised at its thickness, easily a few millimeters, and at how elastic it feels when gently stretched. Next comes cleansing. You dunk the pouch into the whey bath, massaging from top to bottom to expel lingering fish bones and sand grains. Historians still argue whether whey's lactic acid actively inhibited spoilage bacteria, or if Icelanders just liked reusing byproducts to the last drop. Either way, the tub soon clouds with seabird residue. Quirky tidbit: some farms insisted on adding a splash of barley ale to the bath, claiming it sweetened the pouch's temper. You suspect the brewer simply enjoyed an excuse to open another cask. Clean pouches transfer to a low stone table beside the hearth. The farm wife rubs coarse sea salt harvested from boiled away tide pools across the inner lining, then threads each neck onto a birch dowel so it hangs open like a deflated wineskin. The salt draws moisture, tightening the tissues into something that resembles pale leather more than organ meat. Over the hearth, smouldering bricks of dried sheep dung release a dense earthy smoke. Joke 2 wafts up. Somewhere, a perfumer could bottle Owed a barnyard for aspiring Viking reenactors. You help rotate pouches every few minutes, ensuring even exposure to the gently rising fumes. Brown ink runes char the dowel ends. Ownership marks should any pouch wander during winter gatherings. The heat is mild, just enough to drive off water without cooking the proteins. A faint golden tint begins to appear, shell gold courtesy of sheep fuel. Mainstream fact: chemical analyses on excavated pouch fragments show phenolic compounds from dung smoke bound to collagen fibers, corroborating the antimicrobial advantage medieval people intuited long before microscopes. Historians still argue whether the practice was inspired by observation of smoked fish longevity or born from sheer accidental discovery when someone forgot a puffin over the hearth. Hours glide by in cozy monotony, punctuated by crackling peat and the occasional hiss when a drop of whey hits coals. You notice the cat from last night prowling beneath the rack, perhaps drawn by lingering fish aromas. The farm wife shoos it away before reminding you that even a single claw puncture dooms a pouch to leak. Milk is liquid gold, and no feline freeloaders may compromise the vaults. She inspects each stomach, tugging gently. Any that tear receive a secondary life as waterproof tinder pouches for winter travel. Nothing wasted. By mid-afternoon, pouches are firm, amber-streaked, and nearly odorless, except for gentle smokiness. The guide slits a beeswax-sealed jar of last year's fermented milk, pours an experimental splash inside a finished pouch, and cinches it shut with braided horsehair. He flips the pouch upside down. No leak. He grins, pronounces it rast tight, ferment tight, and hands it to you like a newborn. Joke 3 nudges. You cradle it. Discovering parenthood smells faintly like smoked yogurt and fish undertones. Now comes sizing. Smaller puffin stomachs hold about half a litre. Larger fulmar gizzards, harvested sparingly, approach a full litre. Each received a tally mark on a cedar plank inventory, so the farm can estimate winter portions. Quirky tidbit resurfaces. Certain families believed a pouch filled on the waxing moon stayed fresher, so older almanacs include lunar icons next to dairy advice. Nobody tracks data, but traditions linger like persistent whey film. You carry a basket of cured pouches to the milk bench. Fresh, still warm milk from this morning's harvest steams in a copper kettle. A carved reindeer antler funnel fits snugly into each bird neck as the farm wife pours. Milk swirls down, first smooth, then frothy as it meets residual salt and smoke compounds, an impromptu chemistry set. She leaves a small air gap, mindful of fermentation expansion, then secures each neck with a twist of dried sinew pulled from last winter's reindeer kill. Knots tighten like miniature nooses, and a dab of pine pitch seals loose fibers. You lift a newly filled pouch, noting its heft and slight oval shape, nature's canteen ergonomics at work. The farm wife presses it to your nose. The fragrance is grassy sweet, like fresh cream with a bonfire memory. Mainstream fact: Lactococcus lactis cultures naturally present in raw Icelandic milk produce lactic acid rapidly, dropping pH and preventing pathogenic spoilage. Historians still argue whether ancient farmers recognized any link between pouch material and fermentation speed. Some theories propose seabird stomach enzymes accelerated curdling, creating unique flavor depth. Evening nears. The family forms a solemn procession toward the underground cache beside the Harkal. Each pouch sinks into cool darkness, cushioned by kelp fronds that deter rodents. Stone slabs slide back, sealing away weeks of work and tomorrow's nutrition. As you wipe smoke and salt crystals from your hands, the farm wife thanks you with a bowl of rye flatbread slathered in fresh butter. You bite, savoring crunchy edges and creamy center, simple yet decadent relative to fish skin snacks. You lean against the sod wall, watching mist roll off the cliffs. Gulls wheel in the amber sky, silhouettes sharp as runes. Somewhere above, new puffins land with beaks full of fish for their chicks, future providers of next year's stomach stash. You realize, not without awe, that survival here hinges on a delicate barter with nature. You take birds, you thank them, you store milk, and you tell stories long into winter to remember every fragile link. A breeze tugs your cloak, bringing with it that now familiar puffin pouch tang, an aroma equal parts smoke, salt, and hope. Your muscles ache from hours of careful trimming and curing, but satisfaction settles deeper than fatigue. You help transform guts into gourds, scarcity into security, biology into craftsmanship, and as twilight paints copper streaks over basalt peaks, you understand why this odd practice persisted, because here, ingenuity isn't a hobby, it's the heartbeat that keeps families warm through 6-hour blizzards. You step back inside the longhouse, embers glowing low. Children doze against wool pillows, and an elder softly plucks a langspill, strings humming like distant gull cries. Tomorrow offers more cliffs, more milk, and eventually, the first taste of this season's seabird soured concoction. For now, you curl onto a straw pallet, letting the gentle creak of timber lull you, the salty haze still lingering on your tongue like an oath of endurance. Morning dribbles into the valley like warm whey, pale and quietly busy. You shuffle into the longhouse kitchen and spy yesterday's excess milk simmering in a bronze cauldron, steam curling through a smoke-blackened raft escape. The farm wife stirs with a driftwood paddle, nudging curds apart from thin yellow whey. She isn't just making breakfast, she's prepping an accelerant. The warm whey, still humming with lactobacillus, is about to meet last week's puffin pouches for their big fermenting debut. Joke one peeks in, congratulations. You're about to witness the world's weirdest smoothie infusion. She ladles the golden liquid into a horn pitcher and invites you outside, where the earth cellar stones glisten with dew. Levering the lid aside, she retrieves a pouch you filled 2 days back. The sinew tie is tight, leather amber dark, and when you press a fingertip against its side, the surface springs back with suspicious enthusiasm. Inside, countless bacterial minions have turned lactose into lactic acid, releasing tiny CO2 burps that puff the stomach like a bellows. Mainstream historical fact: lactic fermentation creates an acidic environment, hostile to spoilage organisms, the very trick that lets yogurt, sky, and pickles outlive raw ingredients. Medieval Icelanders simply borrowed nature's chemistry set and outsourced the container to a seabird. You untie the knot carefully, because pressure hisses like a polite dragon, and tilt the pouch. Out flows a pearly, slightly viscous liquid, smelling of fresh hay, ocean wind, and faint campfire smoke. You catch it in a wooden cup, swirl, and note tiny bubbles racing the rim. First sip, tart lightning jolts your tongue, earthy, almost lemony, chased by a lingering kiss of kelp smoke. The warmth of fermentation means the drink is cellar cool, not icy, perfect for coaxing sleepy muscles awake. Joke 2 sparkles. Move over kombucha. There's a new hipster brew, call it puffin bucha. The farm wife pours an inch of warm whey into the now empty pouch, sloshing it gently so residual cultures mix with the fresh starter. She explains that adding lukewarm whey wakes the trolls, her shorthand for revving microbial engines. Historians still argue whether medieval dairy makers recognized temperature control's scientific role or just followed grandmotherly instinct, but they definitely claimed warm whey kept winter demons from freezing the milk spirit. Quirky tidbit: one saga side note says farmers sang rough lullabies to full pouches, believing rhythm guided fermentation. Think of it as Viking karaoke for bacteria. Next, she pours in fresh milk straight from this morning's pail. You watch creamy waves settle, then cinch the neck with new sinew soaked in pine pitch. The pouch returns to its kelp-lined burrow, leaving you with another cup of sour milk to evaluate. You swallow, and a pleasant warmth slides to your stomach, a breakfast of calcium and courage. Outside, sheepdog pups tussle over a discarded curd, survival training disguised as play. Midday finds you helping the eldest son tally pouch rotation. Each gets flipped every 24 hours to distribute curd flecks and prevent thick cream from clogging internal folds. He jots runic symbols on a whalebone board, primitive spreadsheets for pouch turnover. You rotate one pouch and notice faint fizz tickling your ear. The belly seems almost alive. Joke 3 winks if it starts singing sea shanties. You're bottling it and going platinum on medieval Spotify. He cuts open a week-old pouch reserved for flavor testing. Curds float like ivory pebbles in pale whey. He scoops a spoonful onto barley flatbread. You chew creamy, lightly smoky, with bright salinity and subtle umami. You'd swear came from Parmesan, yet no cow ever grazed Italian pastures here. Mainstream fact returns. Amino acid breakdown during lactic fermentation can produce glutamates, delivering natural savory notes long before anyone coined the word umami. Icelanders just called it good tang and ate on. The farm wife shares a rumor. A neighboring valley adds crushed crowberries to pouches, tinting the way lilac and jeopardizing trade secrets. Quirky tidbit expands. Another household somewhere on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula stuffs lemony sorrel leaves into pouches each midsummer to keep elves smiling and milk from sulking. You picture mystical QC inspectors in pointed caps. In late afternoon, you cart a basket of yesterday's drained curds to a stone hearth where they'll dry into hard graptos, a portable cheese soldiers once carried on Viking raids. The aroma mingles with peat smoke, wool grease and dried fish, a bouquet only mother scarcity could love. Every now and then someone pops a firm curd cube like candy, chasing it with a sip from a newly tapped puffin pouch. The tang plus crunch creates a flavor symphony both bizarre and oddly addictive. Clouds gather, wind shifts salty cool. The guide notes these gusts quicken fermentation. He stakes a rack of pouches outside, sheltered from rain but exposed to breeze, claiming the Atlantic air teaches milk courage. Historians still argue whether outdoor airing truly accelerates acidification or simply aired out fishy overtones. But anecdotal taste tests support the tradition. You join the rack patrol, tapping pouch hides for tautness, like judging drums in a skin and milk orchestra. Dusk. Again a pale shrug. Never full dark settles. Longhouse benches creak as family members divide tonight's brew. Cups clink. Laughter rises. Your throat tingles pleasantly with each sour sip. Someone riffs a folk joke about how puffins envy cows, now that their stomachs hold gourmet dairy rather than half-digested sprats. Another claims the drink cures everything from melancholy to frost-nipped toes. Maybe so. You certainly feel lighter, buoyed by probiotic bravado. Before bedding down, you peek into the pit one last time. Rows of pouches glow faintly in torchlight, each a silent fermentation chamber, each nurturing tiny microbial legions bent on defending winter pantries. You reflect on the surprise chemistry, warmth, lactic acid, salt, smoke, all conspiring inside a borrowed bird belly to carry nutrition across months of darkness. Scarcity may write the recipe, but bacteria direct the orchestra, and you've just tasted the overture. You roll onto your straw pallet, the faint fizz still echoing on your palate. Outside, the Atlantic thrums its endless percussion. Inside, a pouch somewhere pops a soft bubble. Life continues in tiny fermentive heartbeats, proof that even in harsh corners of the world, warmth can bloom inside unlikely skins. Morning frost crystals glaze every blade of grass, and the ew's breath puffs like kettle steam as you shoulder a spade carved from driftwood and iron scraps. Today is burial day. No funerals, only milk-filled seabird bellies headed underground for their seasonal slumber. You hike to the far edge of the pasture where basalt boulders lean together like gossiping trolls. Beneath them lies soil kept cool, dark and almost refrigerator steady, even when summer sun refuses to blink. Joke 1 surfaces. You're about to play gravedigger for dairy ghosts that will rise months later as dinner guests. The farm wife marks a rectangle with a sheep bone stake and sets you to work. The turf peels back in sod squares, each tufty chunk stacked neatly for later re-roofing. Your spade clinks against stones embedded in volcanic loam. Icelandic soil is stingy, more rubble than dirt. Mainstream historical fact: medieval Icelanders dug storage pits, jarðhús lined with lava rock to keep food at a year-round temperature just above freezing. A lifesaver long before basement freezers hummed beside Wi-Fi routers. You reach subsoil stiff enough to resist blade teeth. The guide drops to his knees, scraping walls smooth with a whale rib scraper so no sharp edge punctures precious pouches later. He hands you a fist-sized black stone, polished by surf. This will serve as the pit's hearth, he says, keeping evil spirits from souring milk. Historians still argue whether talisman stones truly reflected superstition or disguised rudimentary temperature markers. Black basalt retains chill better than porous lava and warns if the pit warms too quickly. You place flat stones across the bottom, creating a tidy mosaic. Fringe tidbit drifts in. Some coastal farms place dried sea urchin shells between layers, swearing the spines prick the mold trolls if they venture near the milk. You sprinkle a token handful of shells, partly for tradition, partly for the satisfying clatter they make on stone. Joke 2. At this point, you're building a medieval charcuterie bunker with optional troll alarm system. 2 teenage cousins arrive, lugging wicker baskets bulging with cured puffin pouches. The pouches are warm from recent filling, sloshing softly like water skins on a midnight march. Each neck is sealed with sinew and capped by a nub of sheep tallow to waterproof knots. One by one, you nestle them on their sides, creating a tidy grid. A kelp blanket, harvested and sun-dried last week, drapes over the first layer, providing cushion, salt minerals, and mouse repellent thanks to its briny aroma. Mainstream fact: kelp contains iodine and antioxidants that discourage bacterial spoilage. Medieval folk simply noticed kelp-wrapped foods lasted longer. You add a second tier, working carefully so no pouch rests directly atop another's knot. Pressure could force the tie loose as fermentation gases expand. Every third pouch gets a poke with a carved bird bone vent needle to release excess air, then resealed. You note faint fizz escaping, a hiss like tiny dragons sighing. The farm wife logs each insertion in her whalebone ledger, row, column and moon phase scribbled in runic shorthand. Call back to earlier, remember those lunar icons. She sketches them again today, trusting celestial influence over microbial mood swings. When the pit nears full, you pour in the last jug of warm whey, letting it seep between pouches. The guide says this inoculates straggler microbes and fills tiny voids with liquid that freezes slower than air pockets. Historians still argue whether whey-flooded pits truly buffered temperature fluctuations or simply added a comforting slosh for bored mice to drown in. Either way, the farm relies on it, so you pour until stones glisten. Now the lid. Flat basalt slabs stacked like roof shingles, heavy enough to require 3 backs and 1 strategic grunt. Turf squares replace disturbed ground. Grass side up so the pit disappears into pasture camouflage. You stamp the edges. Frost sparkles. The farm wife plants a carved driftwood post etched with twisting knotwork, part marker, part charm. Quirky tidbit: some families dabbed blood from the season's first seal hunt on these posts, sealing a pact with sea spirits for calm winter fishing. Today she opts for a dab of sour whey instead, murmuring a rhyme about milk guardians and puffin wings. Work complete. You straighten aching shoulders. Joke 3 limps by. Congratulations, you've just buried 100 liters of milk inside a giant seabird casserole under volcanic rock. No priest required. Relief mingles with pride. Months of sustenance now sleep beneath your boots. Lunch beckons in the longhouse. Bowls of steaming herring stew, thickened with barley and dotted with recent curds. The family gathers on low benches, steam fogging window slits. You ladle a generous scoop, drizzle in a dash of yesterday's sour whey for bite, and savor fish mingling with dairy in a way that would scandalize modern chefs. Mainstream fact slips in. Medieval Icelandic cuisine regularly blurred lines between land and sea, pairing butter with shark or curds with cod, much as Mediterranean cooks paired olive oil and anchovies. Afterward, you follow the guide uphill to check an older pit dug 2 winters ago. He cracks the turf lid, pulls a pouch glossy with age, and slices it open. Thick, clotted yogurt spills into a wooden bowl, creamy, rich, slightly effervescent, remarkably unspoiled. He dips dried rye crusts, crunching with satisfaction. You taste, tang plus smoke meld into what can only be described as Viking kefir. Scarcity bred this miracle, and centuries later, microbes still sign their masterpiece. Evening storms creep from the sea, clouds darken, rain arrives sideways, but the buried milk sleeps immune to weather tantrums. You watch rivulets race across turf as thunder grumbles. Beneath your feet, basalt stones insulate tiny ecosystems, each pouch a self-contained universe of lactic acid diplomacy. Survival, it seems, thrives on invisible negotiations. Back inside, fire crackles and song begins. An elder chants verses from the Havamal, praising hospitality. Between stanzas, he nods to you, acknowledging your role in safeguarding winter stores. You wrap in sheepskin, heart drumming with the pleasant fatigue earned through honest spade work. The storm's howl fades to lullaby. You drift into half-sleep, listening for the far-off whisper of buried pouches continuing their quiet, sour alchemy. Late afternoon sun grazes the horizon, casting long amber cords through the smoke hole as neighbors trek over ridgelines, summoned by the promise of supper and saga. They stamp mud from sealskin boots and duck under the timber lintel, shoulders dusted with wind-blown pumice that glitters like crushed pearls in lamplight. You settle cross-legged on a bench beside the hearth, the room flickering gold as driftwood snaps and sends sparks chasing the rafters. Someone passes a wooden ladle brimming with steaming fish stew, thickened by barley and a dash of kelp salt. You take a sip. The flavor is briny comfort after a day of shovel choreography. A cousin taps your shoulder, offering the evening's headliner, a freshly tapped puffin pouch, neck slit with a swift flick of an antler knife. Milky liquid, pale, and faintly effervescent, streams into clay cups. The farm wife calls it Lundae Misa, puffin buttermilk, though everyone knows that ingredient list includes equal parts bravery and acquired taste. Joke one flits by. If sommeliers existed here, they'd describe the bouquet as Arctic breeze with subtle hints of communal survival. Mainstream historical fact: buttermilk, whether churn spawn or fermentation runoff, was a staple drink across medieval Europe, but Iceland's seabird-stored variant is a regional twist that baffled visiting Norwegian merchants who preferred their dairy unsmoked. You raise your cup, the liquid shimmers ivory, tiny bubbles orbiting the rim. First swallow, bright tang that wakes your palate, followed by a whisper of peat smoke and distant ocean tide. The sensation is creamy and light, proof that lactic acid has danced gracefully in the pouch. A bearded neighbor leans in, elbows on knees, and quips that Cliff-Court cream adds wing to the tongue, encouraging tall tales. Laughter bounces off soot-black beams. The farm wife rings a bronze bell, a rare import traded for butter years ago, signaling the official start of Kveldvaka, the evening watch when chores pause and storytelling begins. Guests settle into a loose circle, cups refilled from a second pouch labelled with a carved rune denoting last month's waxing moon batch. Quirky tidbit slides into conversation. Some valleys held winter contests for the most theatrically popped pouch. Families would wrap cords around an over-fermented belly and twist until it burst like a sour balloon, showering onlookers in fizzy whey. The champion earned bragging rights and an extra share of communal butter. Your eyes widen. Joke 2 bubbles. Medieval Iceland may have invented the first dairy water balloon fight, complete with lactose confetti. The eldest guest clears his throat and launches into a saga fragment about Barthor Snæfellsás, the half-troll guardian of the glacier. Between verses, he pauses for sips of birdbag buttermilk, claiming it keeps the throat smooth as glacier ice. Historians still argue whether such drinks genuinely aided vocal performance or simply numbed singers into confidence, but the cadence rolling from his weathered lips sounds smooth enough to make a harp jealous. Plates of wind-dried haddock and rye flatbread circulate. You dab a wedge into a pool of puffin whey, Discovering the sour lift transforms fish into almost cheese savory. A teenage girl passes a bowl of sky mixed with bilberry mash. The color is twilight purple, the flavor tart sweet perfection. She giggles at your appreciative hum, Joke 3 mutters. Michelin critics clearly missed a trick by never scaling these basalt cliffs. Mid-meal etiquette emerges. Each new pouch tapped must be blessed with a toast. Till mjölk or fjöður. To milk and feather, and passed sunwise around the circle before anyone refills. The clockwise motion, they say, mimics the path of sun and wards off trolls jealous of communal warmth. You comply, feeling your cup grow lighter as neighbors sip. Mainstream fact. Archaeologists have uncovered circular seating arrangements around ancient Icelandic hearths, suggesting ritualized sharing bolstered fragile social bonds in a landscape where neighbors were lifelines during blizzards. A nearby guest, face ruddy from smoke and lacking enthusiasm, recounts a mishap. Last winter, his cousin left a pouch too close to the hearth, and it fermented so vigorously it ruptured, sending whey geysering into the fire and dousing the flames. Worst smelling fire brigade ever. Laughter erupts, your cheeks ache. Another neighbor counters with a tale of a raven stealing a freshly filled pouch, only to drop it mid-flight on a chieftain's roof. The ensuing odor allegedly convinced household spirits to vacate for months. The farm wife nods toward the pit entrance outside. Tonight's burial pouches slumber safe and cool, but she still checks knots before sleep. Fringe science surfaces. Researchers measuring CO2 pressure in replica bird pouches discovered internal gas could exceed that of modern champagne bottles. Small wonder leaks sprayed hearths. Historians still argue whether medieval cooks timed pouch opening at specific carbonation stages or simply accepted an occasional sour eruption as part of dinner theatre. Between mouthfuls, you feel a soft fizz teasing your throat, subtle but lively, a dairy sparkle cleansing fish oils from your palate. The sensation encourages slower sipping, ideal for bedtime drift. The blaze dwindles to embers, lamplight halos, each face in amber glow, eyelids dipping like low horizons. Someone strums a langspiel, strings hum gentle minor chords that match the room's smoky vanilla hush. You lean back against a turf-insulated wall, belly warm with buttermilk and barley, mind humming with saga snippets. In a land of lava fields and endless light, the community's nightly ritual turns bird guts and cow gifts into fellowship. Scarcity has rewritten manners. Forgetting to pass the pouch is a bigger faux pas than mispronouncing a saga hero's name. Yet amid practicality, humor blooms. Neighbors tease each other about whey mustaches and puff in afterbreath. Bonfire coals glow indigo. One by one, guests rise, bow thanks, and step into silver dusk. You help stack wooden bowls, rinse cups with warm water poured from a copper kettle, and hang them on pegs to dry. The farm wife pats your arm, a silent commendation for embracing Cliff-Court cream. You retire to your straw pallet, still tasting faint smoke and tang on your tongue. Outside, sheep rustle under a moon that won't fully commit to darkness. Inside, pouches slumber in pits and on ceiling hooks, silent microbial orchestras fine-tuning tomorrow's tang. You pull a wool blanket to your chin, letting lullabies fade into the soft hiss of distant surf. Puffin buttermilk may never headline gourmet festivals, but tonight it cradles you like a warm wave, rocking you toward dreams of basalt cliffs, fearless climbers, and the curiously delicious alchemy of milk meeting seabird magic. The following morning, the longhouse wakes to a chorus of stifled groans, the universal sign that last night's puffin pouch revelry left a sour cream echo in many throats. You shuffle toward the hearth and discover a small drama in progress. One pouch hung too close to the embers has burst during the night. Its smoky whey trickled into the ashes, hissing like an insulted spirit. The farm wife frowns, fingers tapping a wooden talisman at her belt. Bursting, she insists, means alpha, mischief-loving elves feel neglected. Joke 1 yawns awake. Apparently even supernatural squatters demand dairy offerings before rent is due. She ushers everyone outside for a quick propitiation, a spoon of fresh whey poured onto a moss-tufted stone, said to be an elf door. You follow, drizzle the tangy liquid, and whisper thanks. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval Icelandic law codes explicitly fined neighbors who trespassed on Vardar or elf mounds. acknowledging a cultural belief so strong it entered legislation. Milk, bread or ale were customary tributes. Today's buttermilk splash is perfectly canonical. Back indoors, a stable boy sneezes thunderously after sipping his morning cup. Instantly, several heads nod approval. Better to sneeze now than choke later, they say. Quirky tidbit slips in. Locals claim that a sneeze blows away the milk sprite, who hides in the first gulp, searching for an unwary throat to pinch. To ensure the sprite flees, drinkers follow each sip with a theatrical sniff or exaggerated cough. You comply on your next draught, half for ritual, half because tangy whey can tickle nasal passages like vinegar fireworks. Joke 2 pipes up. In modern etiquette handbooks, polite company covers sneezes. Here, failure to sneeze is the real faux pas. After chores, the guide leads you to a smaller turf hut, used solely for quality checks. Barley straw mats cover a stone table, and upon them rest 3 aged pouches at varying stages of fermentation. He slices the oldest. Whey spurts and curds slump out smelling sharp, almost citrusy. Everyone leans in, noses wrinkling appreciatively. He spoons a sample onto a horn dish and passes it around. You taste bracing tartness balanced by silky fat, delicate smoke undertones like buttermilk, decided to cosplay as brie. Historians still argue whether Icelandic palate truly favored such aggressive acidity or whether limited salt availability made sour better than spoiled. Quality control now veers mystical. The farm wife lights a twist of dried angelica root, wafting aromatic smoke over the curds. If the smoke clings, milk is heavy, too close to spoilage. If it dissipates smoothly, elves approve. Today the smoke dances away in wispy ribbons, cheers all around. You watch intrigued, a proto-microbial sniff test garbed in folklore. Mainstream fact returns. Angelica contains antifungal compounds. Holding curds near its smoke might indeed discourage mold, though medieval farmers framed it as spiritual handshake. Lunch break finds you sitting on a sun-warmed boulder, nibbling rye flatbread slathered in fresh butter and drizzled with last year's berry syrup. A neighbouring shepherd recounts how his aunt wards off spoilage sprites by etching an X on every pouch with a forge-heated nail. Another claims placing a raven skull atop the storage pit keeps curd-stealing trolls at bay, and also terrifies nosy foxes. Joke 3 swoops. No marketing team today could match medieval Iceland's creativity. Now with extra raven skull tim for freshness. You listen to tales of catastrophic spoilage. One winter, a new bride mistied pouch knots. Gas built up, lids popped, whey deluged the root cellar, freezing into a sour glacier that took spring thaw to remove. Her in-laws dubbed her Skylager, curd bath for life. The lesson glows clear as aurora at midnight. Respect the pouch, or risk both hunger and humiliating nickname. Afternoon chores. Shift to turning stored pouches in the cellar. You descend the stone steps, torch in hand, and note rows of leather bellies glistening in flicker light. Each is rotated to prevent cream from settling into thick caps that crack during freeze-thaw cycles. A faint fizz hums, hundreds of invisible bacteria feasting, releasing bubbles that tickle pouch walls like trapped laughter. You turn one. A tiny hiss escapes, reminiscent of soda uncorked. Scholars still argue whether medieval folk intentionally bred carbonation for flavor or simply liked the novel tingling sensation. Either way, an accidental sip of flat buttermilk earns polite grimaces. Fizz equals freshness in these parts. Back at the hearth, the stable boy who sneezed earlier polishes a carved cedar whistle. He explains it's blown before tapping any new pouch. The piercing note scares away lurking spirits who might sour the first pour. You ask if spirits truly fear a wooden whistle. He shrugs, grinning, then confides it's also a practical signal. Hearing the note, farmhands know to bring cups. Pragmatic superstition at its finest. Supper approaches. Tonight's menu features lamb stew, brightened with a ladle of aged puffin whey. Acidity tenderizes meat while smoke threads flavor through broth. You help stir, noticing how whey's pale cloud swirls then disappears into stew, leaving only aroma footprints. Everybody gathers again, bowls steaming, faces ruddy. Toasts fly, for pouches that stay plump, for elves who keep curds sweet, for sneezes that save throats. The whistle peals, a fresh pouch is tapped. Tiny bubbles glimmer in torchlight like captive stars. Joke 4. Bonus round. Nudges. Imagine a future sommelier, sniffing these curds, waxing poetic about notes of basalt and airborne guano, charging tourists €50 a dribble. The farm wife laughs, wiping tears. She'll stick to barter and neighbourly goodwill. After eating, you step into crisp evening air. Low clouds glow pink, reflecting midnight sun, barely skimming the sea. You inhale deeply. Peat smoke, distant surf, faint dairy sourness, still clinging. Spoilage sprites and elf blessings aside, the system works, milk endures, families thrive, and culture, both microbial and musical, flourishes in synchronic rhythm. You head to bed, mind buzzing with sneeze law and whistle protocols. Your straw pillow squeaks from somewhere in the dark, a pouch pops faintly, expelling a confident sigh. Spoilage averted, spirits appeased, tomorrow's breakfast secured. You smile into the half-dark, realizing survival dances on threads of superstition and fermentation, and both, tonight, feel comfortingly snug around your sleepy shoulders. Dawn filters through the smoke hole, casting a dusty shaft onto the longhouse floor where you sprawl half awake amid wool blankets. The farmwife's bronze bell jingles an urgent rhythm. Time to settle accounts. Today is Thingdagur, the quarterly reckoning when local chieftains dispatch riders to collect taxes, tithes and gossip. You rub smoke from your eyes, remembering that in Iceland, milk isn't merely breakfast, it's currency, and those puffin pouches snoozing under basalt carry more fiscal weight than a purse of silver. Outside, ponies paw the frosty earth as two levy men dismount, cloaks snapping in the Atlantic breeze. Each wears a sealskin tablet case, bulging with tally sticks and beeswax seals. You greet them with a polite nod and an internal joke one. Modern tax auditors don't arrive smelling like cod and kelp, but paperwork dread feels timeless. The levy men glide toward the storage pit, sniffing the air like hounds. Mainstream historical fact clicks in. Iceland's medieval law code, Gragas, stipulated that 1/10 of all dairy measured in butter weight be rendered to a chieftain or church annually. Shortfalls invited fines, exile, or worse, a saga describing your penny-pinching shame. You pry the stone lid, revealing rows of leather bellies gleaming in torchlight. The inspectors produce a whalebone dipstick, insert it into a random pouch and swirl. Satisfied with the volume and tart bouquet, they scratch runes onto tally sticks representing this farm's dairy quota. So many pounds of butter converted into equivalency of fermented milk. One inspector jokes about liquid butter, pocketing a pouch for the chieftain's table. The farm wife agrees gratefully. Fewer pouches to store, more goodwill sealed. Historians still argue whether such samples were regulated perks or veiled extortion, but either way, smiling and pouring an extra cup greases wheels better than rancid tallow. The levy men next assess seabird harvest due. By custom, every cliff farm owes a percentage of bird meat, down and stomachs, yes, even organs count, to their local hove, temple-turned-church. You hoist a bundle of cleaned pouches, stacked like deflated balloons, and weigh them against a driftwood counterweight. Quirky tidbit emerges. Officials often accepted driftwood itself as partial payment, since timber is rarer than unicorn tears on this treeless island. Some savvy farmers padded quotas by swapping puffin pouches with shore fines. One knotty spruce trunk could erase half a season's bird bag debt. Joke 2 nods. Imagine paying modern taxes with flotsam IKEA hasn't patented yet. Payment settled. Negotiation shifts to trade. A scarred skipper unloads his open boat at the beach below. Bundles of Norwegian iron rods, modest coils of brass wire, and a coveted oak barrel. In return, he seeks fermented dairy, portable calories for storm-tossed voyages, and bird down to pad northern cloaks. The farm wife presents 3 mature pouches, their contents sharp enough to kick insomnia off a galloping horse. The skipper sips, eyes watering, then grins wide. Deal struck. You help carry the iron to the tool shed. Each rod promises axes, hinges, or a fresh piton for cliff harvests. Joke 3 flutters. Puffin Milk, now sponsoring hardware upgrades since 1200 CE. Over noon stew. The chieftain's clerk unfurls vellum pages recording last year's drift logs. 1 barrel of fermented milk swapped for 2 boatloads of Baltic tar. a pouch of extra tang traded for saffron threads that dyed the parish altar cloth. Mainstream fact settles in. Coastal trade kept Iceland tethered to Europe despite vast seas. Dairy products, especially shelf-stable skyr and buttermilk, ranked among top exports alongside wadmal wool. Ships left with barrels of tangy nutrition returned with iron, timber and rare spices, proof that even avian milk flasks could grease the wheels of globalization. The clerk mentions rumours of a Shetland crew experimenting with cod bladder milk jugs, fish guts to match their fish brains. He scoffs. The farm wife smirks. Puffin pouches remain top shelf. Yet competition breeds innovation. Historians still argue whether Iceland's pouch practice spread via trade routes or sprouted independently across northern archipelagos. Evidence is patchy, like driftwood inscriptions half chewed by sea worms. Afternoon sun slants low. Iron rods gleam beside the forge. You help the blacksmith farmwife's brother position a puffin pouch near his anvil. He claims the curdled whey, once heated, doubles as quench liquid for tempering blades. Lactic acids interact with carbon, lending steel a subtle hardness. Quirky tidbit. Maybe folklore, maybe metallurgy. Either way, he plunges a red-hot knife blade into sour milk with a hiss that smells like toasted yogurt. He lifts the blade, eyes the grain, nods satisfied. Science or superstition, sometimes the boundary blurs like heat shimmer. Evening edges in under clouds stitched purple and gold. The levy men, debts settled, mount ponies and vanish across pumice fields, pouches clinking on saddles. The skipper's boat slips away, sail fat with wind, fermented milk sloshing in cargo hold, alongside iron debt receipts. You stand on basalt bluff, listening to surf and faint creak of rigging. Joke 4. Bonus whispers. Somewhere at sea, a sailor will uncork puffin milk and wonder why his burp smells faintly of smoked kelp. Back in the longhouse, the farm counts remaining pouches, pleased. Enough to pay church tithe, trade for timber, and still survive winter's belly. Butter barrels exhale quietly in the cellar. Iron rods clank in gratitude near the forge. You sink onto a bench, warmed by the math of survival. Scarcity may write the ledger, but creativity pens the margin notes, and puffin milk yields both spreadsheets and supper. Lamplight flickers. The clerk departs, scrolls secured in sealskin. A hush settles over the hearth. You sip a mug of fresh whey, tang softened by a spoon of honey earned from barter. Taste buds sigh contentment. Tomorrow's worries retreat for now. Outside, sheep bleat goodnight to basalt peaks. Within, you bask in glow of iron, dairy and a law code flexible enough to translate bird bellies into barter chips. Your eyes drift closed, mind drifting on gentle lactic tides. Somewhere beneath turf, buried pouches fizz softly, already accruing interest for the next tax season. Trade winds moan beyond the cliffs, carrying whispers of cod bladder competition. Let them try. You've witnessed the original seabird bank, and its assets taste like survival wrapped in salt and smoke. A week drifts by, and the Atlantic horizon flicks a fresh surprise onto the basalt stage. 2 clinker-built boats bobbing toward the cove, square sails striped russet and cream, salt spray glitter flying off their bows like thrown silver. You jog down the pumice slope, puffin pouch tang still on your breath, to greet distant cousins, one crew from Greenland's eastern settlement, the other from Shetland's misty Voe. Their helmsmen swing ashore, boots squelching in kelp, eyes bright with that can we trade grin recognized from Reykjavik to Reykjavik, the one in Canada that is. Joke 1 perks up. Apparently even medieval GPS recalculates when someone offers free dairy samples. They haul wicker crates onto the shingle. Greenlanders present seal meat slabs cured in snow pits, still rimmed with crystalline frost despite midsummer sun. Mainstream historical fact. Norse Greenlanders relied on ringed seal hunting for protein and fashioned the animals' tough stomachs into durable liquid pouches, rugged thermoses for melted blubber, blood soup, or when coastal cows cooperated, milk from hardy Greenland cattle descendant of the same Norse stock chewing Iceland's meager grass. They slice open a demonstration pouch, thick seal hide tanned with willow bark, its inner lining smeared with goose fat to waterproof seams. You sniff musky, marine, faintly gamey, very different from smoke-scented puffin leather. Shetlanders counter with smaller packages. cod bladders inflated like pale balloons and knotted tight. They giggle at your raised eyebrow and confess these make perfect single-serving milk flasks strapped to fishermen's belts. Quirky tidbit: the Shetland crew sometimes dyes the bladders with crushed whelk shells to track fermentation stages by colour shift. Pink signals peak tartness. Historians still argue whether colour-coded bladders evolved from practical observation or a prank gone profitable when merchants paid extra for sunset blush dairy. Either way, a sailor hands you a rosy pouch. You bite the tip and sweet sour milk squirts onto your tongue, tasting faintly of brine and cod collars. Joke 2 flutters. Somewhere, a modern mixologist is patenting fish sack fizz for hipster brunch menus. Campfires sprout on the beach. You trade your host's puffin pouches for their seal skins and cod bladders, arranging a cross-culture dairy tasting beneath gull-speckled skies. Greenlanders sip your smoky sour whey and nod approval, commenting it pairs well with icy mornings and walrus blubber toast. Shetlanders gulp, eyes watering, pronounce it stout as peat liquor, then counter with their cod bladder brew lighter, almost lemony. You note how different container materials shift flavour: puffins smoke kisses, seal hides gamey undertone, cod bladders salt whisper. Mainstream fact: collagen and residual fats in organic pouches leach flavour compounds into fermenting milk, acting like primitive oak barrels. Container chemistry matters even when the barrel once digested herring. Sitting on drift logs, you swap preservation hacks. A Greenland hunter describes sealing milk inside hollow caribou, antler tips capped with soapstone stoppers for sled journeys, chilled by permafrost. The milk half freezes into tangy slush, a popsicle for the polar road. Meanwhile, a Shetland weaver recounts wrapping curds in dried kelp sheets and hanging them in chimney smoke. Makes the cheese taste of sea wind and bonfire. Joke 3 winks. Icelandic elves would demand royalties for that flavour profile. You introduce both crews to your farm's pigment-etched lunar ledger system. A Shetlander scratches his beard, then confesses they carve tiny notches on the fish bladder knots to denote quarter moons. Simpler but prone to hungry seagulls mistaking them for worm snacks. Greenlanders reveal they bury seal pouch caches beneath semi-frozen scree, marking sites with upright walrus tusks aligned to Polaris, so snowdrifts don't obscure winter retrieval. Historians still argue whether these star-aligned tusks doubled as spiritual waymarkers or just practical refrigeration signposts. Either way, they drew wary respect from passing Inuit hunters, who avoided tusk-guarded mounds believing them ghost caches. Evening colours smear violet over wave crests. Trade talk slips toward entertainment. A Shetland fiddler whips out a sheep-gut string instrument, soaring a jaunty reel. Greenlanders pound sealskin drums, and Icelandic teens clap along, turning the shingle into an impromptu silid. Cups circulate: seal stomach mead, honey fermented inside clean seal gut, cod bladder milk shandies, and your stalwart puffin buttermilk. You try a sip of each in sequence. Your tongue stages a world tour, from smoky tang to briny citrus, to faintly fishy sweetness. Someone challenges you to a pouch-tapping race. Who can puncture, pour and seal fastest without spilling? You accept, tying a puffin pouch around your waist like a grotesque canteen. At the whistle you slice, pour, knot and raise hands. Only a dribble escapes. The Greenlander's seal pouch fights back. Viscous milk gurgles sluggishly, costing him seconds. The Shetlander's cod bladder deflates smoothly, but pops its knot at the sprint's end, spraying a spectator's boots. Laughter erupts. You claim victory, though you suspect the puffin pouch's compliance owes more to yesterday's careful smoking than personal skill. Night arrives softly, the sun skulking below waves for its brief nap. You guide visitors up to the longhouse, where extra straw pallets await. Before sleep, everyone shares cautionary tales. Shetlanders warn of finfolk, shape-shifting sea wizards, stealing milk bladders to brew love potions. Greenlanders recount Tupilak spirits sabotaging seal pits if hunters disrespect bones. Mainstream fact tidily slips under the blankets. Anthropologists note that linking spoilage to supernatural retaliation encouraged scrupulous food handling in harsh climates. You drift off amid a patchwork chorus of accents and gentle snores. Outside, 3 pouch types rest side by side in sand pits cooling under starlight. puffin, seal, cod, microbial multiculturalism in leather, hide and fish sacks. Inter-island collaboration means winter menus diversify. Smoky notes from Iceland, gamey richness from Greenland, seawater sparkle from Shetland. Scarcity may isolate farms, but boats stitch flavors and survival tricks into a shared North Atlantic cookbook. As dawn hints pink, gulls wheel overhead, and you wake sensing tomorrow's possibilities. Maybe you'll test a cod bladder yourself, dye it with whelk purple, infuse the milk with angelica, and bury it next to puffin pouches. See which flavor triumphs by Yule. Historians still argue which container produced the earliest Nordic blue cheese crumble. You intend to add experimental footnotes. For now, you stretch beneath turf rafters, lungs full of smoked kelp and seal hide musk, feeling like a living page of an ever-growing diary, where milk meets ingenuity under the gaze of northern lights. Wind slithers beneath the turf eaves and whistles through chinks in the longhouse walls, rattling whalebone hooks like brittle castanets. Inky December sky presses against smoke holes, and at last Iceland's daylight debt comes due. Darkness settles for 20+ hours, the kind that swallows sound and time alike. You tug a sealskin cloak tighter and glance toward the hearth embers, whose glow cast restless shadows that rise and fall like breath. Outside, snowflakes swirl sideways, ice confetti flung by a tantrum gale, while inside, everyone braces for Kveldvaka marathons, in which sagas, riddles and snacks become co-pilots through the Arctic night. The farm wife ladles tonight's first nourishment. Thin strips of frozen puffin curd, sawed from a pouch retrieved hours ago and left on a windowsill to firm until it crackles under a knife. She passes the shard to you, its edges frosted white as polar dawn. You bite, crunch, and tangy crystals melt into a creamy fizz that pricks the tongue, almost sherbet-like. Joke one murmurs, medieval Iceland just invented birdbag gelato, patent pending. Churn optional. Mainstream historical fact. Winter indoor entertainment relied on saga recitations, weaving and tool repair, all fueled by lightweight, long-lasting snacks like frozen sky bites or hartfiskur, fish jerky. Frozen curds, courtesy of seabird pouches, offered protein, probiotics and a flavor bright enough to wake drowsy storytellers. The elder griot clears his throat and begins Egil's saga, voice rolling like distant surf. Firelight catches the gleam of his walrus-bone storytelling staff, carved with knotwork so intricate it resembles knitted fog. Each stanza punctuated by delicate sips from clay cups of warmed puffin whey, mellowed with a dab of honey. You sit shoulder to shoulder with Greenland and Shetland guests, all wrapped in patched cloaks. Every so often a listener snaps a shard of curd between teeth. Crunch, timed perfectly at cliffhanger moments like punctuation marks audible across centuries. The farm wife circulates with a basket of rye chips smeared in seal fat butter and sprinkled with toasted angelica seeds, a curious marriage of land and sea, crunchy and savory. Quirky tidbit surfaces. Some families believed chewing loudly during saga recitations scared away Drog or restless spirits drawn to quiet rooms. If the crunch chorus faltered, the elder would rap his staff, prompting an obliging bite. Joke 2 winks. Here, table manners rank lower than ghost management on the etiquette chart. A lull in the tale invites the Shetland fiddler to tune sheep gut strings by fire pop. He launches into a lilting reel, joined by Greenlandic frame drum patter, and suddenly frozen curd shards double as makeshift castanets, snapped rhythmically by rowdy teens. Laughter loops around rafters, stitching warmth beyond what embers alone can grant. Historians still argue whether cross-island jam sessions shaped shared North Atlantic musical motifs, or if similarity blossomed independently from comparable hardships. Either way, tonight's improv proves scarcity breeds harmony as deftly as it ferments milk. You slip outside for a breath of crisp starlit air. Snow skitters underfoot like sugar across slate. Moonlight paints basalt knolls blue-silver, and from pits buried beneath, pouches slumber in snug ferment. You recall the cod bladder experiment begun with Shetland guests. Wind off the bay carries a scalp-tingling hush, as if microbial orchestras tuning below ground hum in sympathy with earthly instruments above. Joke 3 surfaces. You half expect the buried bellies to produce bass lines if the fiddler hits a good groove. Re-entering the longhouse, you catch the elder at saga midpoint. Egil dazzles with poetic mind games. You nibble another frozen curd and feel the fizz echo Edgel's wit, sharp but secretly nourishing. The Greenlander offers seal pouch slush milk, semi-frozen with tiny ice crystals. It clinks in horn tumblers like clandestine sleet. Flavor, tangy, wild, faintly gamey, but refreshing. A palate cleanser between heroic beheadings and political intrigue. A Shetland lass counters with cod bladder lemonade. Milk fermented with crowberries, colored dusky rose, sweet sour and gently effervescent. Everyone votes the sampler platter a triumph. 3 pouches, 3 climates, 1 communal winter shield. Mainstream fact slips in. Norse colonies maintained fragile lifelines through oral tradition. Sagas preserved lore, genealogy and moral code. Milk snacks during long recitations prevented drowsiness and kept throats limber. You picture a medieval TED Talk where each viewer receives a sour milk snow cone to ensure attentiveness. Historians still argue whether repeated saga performances preserved details with near photographic accuracy or if embellishment snowballed over generations, much like fermentation morphs milk flavors. Likely both, you muse, crunching one last frosty shard. Past midnight, though darkness hides the clock, conversation ebbs, embers settle crimson. One by one, listeners roll into blankets. The elder mumbles a closing verse praising resilience, then plunges his staff butt into packed earth. The clang echoes lightly, the saga sealed till next night. You linger by the hearth, watching a cat paw a stray curd cube before nosing it onto a warm stone, apparently preferring melt-softened cheese. Quirky tidbit redux. Viking wisdom held that cats could predict which dairy pouches would age best by which they napped beside. Tonight's feline chooses Puffin, reinforcing brand loyalty. A final snow squall rattles shutters. You bank the fire, inhaling driftwood's salty perfume, mixing with faint whey tartness in the air. The longhouse yawns, timbers creaking as though they too digest stories. Climbing to your loft pallet, you wrap a sheepskin cloak tight. Sleep drifts in on a gentle whey bubble fizz. Outside, snow piles quietly, thick quilt over buried pits. Inside, dreams unspool like sagas. Cliff climbs, cod bladder balloons and curd shards glittering under northern lights. Odd yet soothing postcards from a world where survival flows from bird bellies and long nights grow shorter through shared verse and crunching snacks. Days shorten, then rebound. Seasons perform their slow pirouette. And one morning, a creaking wagon trundles up the pumice track bearing something almost magical. Barrels. Real oak barrels. Staves ribbed in iron. Bungholes cork plugged tight as a miser's purse. The driver, broad-shouldered merchant from Bergen, grins as he jerks back the wagon tarp, revealing 6 casks the color of roasted chestnuts. Your breath catches. Wood big enough for a Viking longship seems outlandish on a treeless island that measures timber in driftwood splinters. Joke 1 pops in. These barrels look like they've swallowed half a Norwegian forest and now have heartburn from the boat ride. The farm wife circles the casks, palms tracing cooper joints. Imported oak smells faintly of vanilla and spice, an intoxicating contrast to kelp smoke and bird leather. Mainstream historical fact, by the 14th century, Hanseatic traders routinely ferried barrel staves and iron hoops to Iceland in exchange for wool, fish and fermented dairy, easing local dependence on makeshift containers. Oak, saturated with tannins, offered durability and a different microbial playground from puffin pouches. The merchant taps a cask, boasting it can hold 20 times the milk of a single bird belly and lasts decades if cared for. You nod politely, but nostalgia stirs. Can neat cooperage truly match the feather-kissed tang you've grown to crave? The family debates allocation. Butter and sky barrels overflow the cellar. Space is tighter than a sheep in winter shearing. Still, the allure of stowing surplus milk without cliff scrambling is strong. They decide to dedicate 1 barrel to an experiment. You volunteer as chief taster, another joke in disguise, though nobody objects. The merchant rolls the chosen cask beside the dairy bench. Its iron hoops ping in the chill air like distant bells. Milk flows, warm from morning milking, into a copper vat. The farm wife seeds it with a ladle of mature puffin whey, her insurance that the oak won't mute the farm's signature tang. Quirky tidbit surfaces. Locals claim adding a fistful of burnt kelp ash to barrel staves teaches the wood about the sea, helping replicate smoke notes lost without dung fires. She obliges, sprinkling black flecks into the empty cask before they funnel in the milk. You watch the liquid rise, froth around the bunghole, then settle with a placid sheen. The plug thumps home. Your first oak-aged puffin-flavoured brew begins its quiet calculus of bacteria and wood tannin. Weeks pass. Barrels sweat faint beads of whey-tinted moisture along hoops, absorbing and releasing water like slow heartbeats. You notice earthy vanilla hints drifting through the longhouse, overlaying peat smoke. When the bung finally pops for tasting, a sigh like exhaling forest air escapes. The milk inside has thickened to a custard-smooth curd swimming in pale gold whey. First spoonful, flavour less smoky than pouch batch, but layers of sweet oak spice swirl with lactic brightness. Joke 2. Size. Who knew a tree could whisper pastry cream to a puffin's greatest hits? Historians still argue whether Iceland's gradual shift to barrels represented progress or peril. Some contend that consistent volume, simplified taxes and trade. Others lament lost microbial diversity, once bird bellies seeded ground to uniform oak pores. You sense truth on both sides. The barrel's flavour is pleasant, almost refined, but lacks the playful fish smoke spark that once surprised your palate. It's the difference between harp and fiddle, one elegant, the other foot-stomping. Trade winds amplify the debate. A Shetlander revisits, sampling oak import. He nods approval, yet confides that cod bladder storage better suits their sea-salted aesthetic. Greenlanders, pragmatic as ever, covet the barrel's capacity. Fewer seal hides to tan means more time hunting narwhal. The farm wife, feeling conflicted, proposes a blended strategy. Oak for surplus trade milk, puffin pouches for house flavour. The merchant beams, more barrel orders loom. Night finds you at the hearth, sipping side-by-side bowls. One pouch ferment, one barrel aged. You note differences allowed for the farm's ledger. Barrel batch coats tongue silky, finishes gently sour with wood spices. Pouch batch crackles with smoke, bright sea spray acid, and faint fish echo. Both nourish, yet each tells a distinct story.
Joke 3. Croons. Consider them fraternal twins. One studied abroad in France, the other still climbs cliffs barefoot.
New workflows emerge. Children lift smaller oak kegs onto sleds, dragging them to storage caves where temperature hovers just above freezing. Men still scale cliffs for puffin organs, but fewer ropes dangle now. Demand shifts to wood. Efficiency rises, yet cliff harvest's old camaraderie dims. Some teens text, well, carve runes to complain edge walking is grandparents' thrill. You can't help missing the guano slick adventure, the adrenaline of pouch popping mid-climb. Progress, it seems, asks for trade-offs measured not just in litres but in laughter. Mainstream fact returns. Archaeological pollen samples and isotopic analysis hint barrel adoption surged around coastal trade hubs first, gradually seeping inland. Remote valleys held on to puffin pouches, 2 centuries longer, partly from tradition, partly because barrels were costly to haul over lava deserts. The farm sits at a trade crossroads, thus it straddles eras, a living museum of leather bellies and oak bellies coexisting. One icy dawn, a pouch bursts in the pit. Gas build-up meets inattentive flipping. Its whey freezes to a tart icicle stalactite. Simultaneously, barrel 2 weeps a slow leak, iron hoop loosened by temperature swings. Both methods falter, neither is foolproof. You patch the wooden seam with melted pine resin and tie a fresh sinew around the pouch's replacement. Experience whispers, adaptability matters more than container pedigree. Later, the eldest son suggests smoking oak casks lightly over angelica roots to mimic pouch flavors. The blacksmith modifies the smokehouse with low vents. First test scents the barrel milk delicately. Taste recaptures half the lost puffin kiss. Innovation loops back to tradition, knitting wood and wing together. At season's close, ledger tallies reveal profits from surplus barrel milk sold to passing merchants, funds used to buy finer loom weights and a glass bead necklace for the farm wife. Yet around the family table, the prized beverage remains pouch bright and smoky. When the elder recites a winter saga, cups past sunwise still brim with cliff-caught cream. Wood may balance the books, but puffin pouches keep stories alive. You fall asleep that night to dueling aromas. Vanilla oak sweetness drifting from cellar vents and familiar tangy smoke lingering near the rafters where pouches dry. Dreams braid both scents into strange harmony. Barrels rolling down cliffs, sprouting wings. Puffins wearing Cooper's aprons, tapping oak staves like drums. Morning will bring fresh experiments, blend ratios, smoke schedules, maybe a seal hide barrel coat to prevent leaks. But for now, the farm's identity floats between two containers, each carrying survival in its belly. And you, fortunate traveler, taste both worlds, realizing progress doesn't always erase the past. Sometimes it ferments alongside it, adding layers to the sip. Morning light flickers in fluorescent strips instead of sunbeams, and the whir of a climate-controlled air handler replaces Atlantic wind. You stand, lab coat over wool sweater, in Reykjavik's National Museum Conservation Wing, flanked by glass walls and humming fume hoods. Remember that puffin pouch you patched months ago? A fragment of its smoky leather now lies on a stainless steel tray under LED magnifiers. You've traded basalt cliffs for blue nitrile gloves, yet the story still loops like milk swirling in a bird's belly. A conservator beckons you closer. She pinches loose fibers from the pouch, slides them into a microcentrifuge tube, and labels its sample PP37. Mainstream historical fact: over the past decade, Icelandic archaeologists have excavated dozens of storage pits at abandoned farms, unearthing thousands of seabird stomach fragments, some still redolent of smoke after 600 years underground. Using gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, they're mapping ancient lipid profiles, proof that lactic acids, kelp phenols, and sheep dung smoke left chemical fingerprints as distinctive as saga verses. You step to a workbench where a doctoral student gently brushes volcanic grime from a shard of oak stave dated to the late 1300s. She explains how the plank's inner pores still contain trapped milk fat, solidified into waxy ghosts. Quirky tidbit: the team nicknames these deposits cheese mummies. With a grin, she opens a petri dish. Inside, minuscule fungal blooms sprout like snowflakes, lab-resurrected microbes cultured from 700-year-old dairy residue. They smell faintly of caramelized yogurt and seaside campfire. Joke one nudges. Somewhere a foodie influencer dreams of artisanal Viking starter culture subscriptions. An adjacent lab bench hosts isotope charts comparing puffin pouches, seal hides, cod bladders, and oak barrels. Lines spike differently. Pouch samples contain elevated guaiacol compounds, smoke markers, while seal hides show boatloads of omega-3 fatty acids. Historians still argue whether medieval palates intentionally sought these nuanced tastes or merely accepted whatever container chemistry delivered. A professor scrolls through 3D reconstructions, showing how microbes colonized pouch interiors, forming biofilms that may have seeded each new batch like sourdough crocks. You peer into a digital microscope. Magnified leather fibers look like braided rivers. Nestled within spherical Lactococcus cells cluster like tiny pearls. The conservator points out mineral flecks, kelp ash constituents anchoring bacterial colonies. Mainstream fact: early results suggest ash and dung smoke didn't merely flavor milk. They provided alkalinity buffers and phenolic antimicrobials, shaping microbial succession toward tangy stability. The myth of elves blessing milk might disguise keen empirical observation. Do this and the batch survives. A modern food scientist wheels in a steel canister of liquid nitrogen. She flash freezes curd scrapings, excavated from a 15th century pit, then pulverizes them to isolate ancient DNA fragments. Her goal: reconstruct the full genome of medieval Icelandic Lactococcus strains. Fringe tidbit: preliminary sequences show genes for cold shock proteins absent in most modern dairy cultures. Evolutionary perks for fermenting at near-freezing cellar temps. Scientists dream of brewing authentic saga yogurt, though health board paperwork already looms like a bureaucratic troll. Lunch break swaps microscopes for taste tests. A chef in collaboration with the museum unveils 3 ramekins, fermentation trials using reconstructed puffin pouch microbes, aged in modern silicone bags seasoned with sheep dung smoke. First spoonful snaps you back to cliffside days. Smoky, sharp, faint fish echo. Staffers murmur approvingly, while visitors make polite raised eyebrows. Joke 2 surfaces. Michelin stars might shiver at the ammonia whiff, but your nostalgia glands cheer. Afternoon presentations kick off in a lecture hall. Slides display CT scans of burst pouches frozen mid-eruption, milk geysers immortalized in soil. Another speaker shows color-mapped pressure simulations, proving that gas buildup in winter could exceed 50 kPa, comparable to modern sparkling cider bottles. Historians still argue whether households intentionally timed openings for carbonated celebration or lived in constant fear of midnight dairy bombs. The evidence: saga lines about singing pouches that popped merrily at Yule. Your turn arrives. You recount first-hand cliff climbs, smokehouse chores, and cod bladder experiments. Scholars jot notes, intrigued by living history data. A question arises: did puffin pouches persist because of superior flavor, or because myths, elves, sneezes, whistles reinforced best practices? You answer, probably both. Superstition turned food safety into ritual. Ritual bred consistency, and microbes rewarded consistency with survival. The room nods. Debate resumes, but now your story seasons the discourse. Later, you join a dig crew at a newly exposed farm mound. Under a tent, students trowel delicate layers, glint surfaces, a raven skull amulet with sinew cord, precisely as saga jokes foretold. Nearby, sealed under peat, a collapsed barrel weeps pale residue. You collect a sample, future lab fodder. Joke 3 hums. The barrel lost the flavor war, but won a cameo in your paper. Back in Reykjavik that night, you sip coffee laced with a dash of modern sky whey. City lights flicker against winter sky, but your mind drifts to basalt cliffs, midnight sun, and buried pits humming softly under snow. Progress now wields pipettes and mass specs, but still chases the same question. Medieval farmers pondered how to stretch nourishment through the long dark. Walking to your guest house, you pass a trendy cafe advertising Nordic Kefir Flight Oak Puffin Seal. Historians still argue whether microbes or myth sell this experience, but customers inside clink glasses, eyes widening at flavors once scorned. You smile, pushing open the door. Perhaps myth always marketed survival, and microbes merely wrote the fine print. You order the puffin pour. First sip, tang, smoke, ocean whisper. Second sip, oak vanilla. Third, seal hide iodine. Glass empty. You pocket the tasting card for your archives. Proof that flavor travels centuries with help from curious palates and open minds. Outside, harbor wind smells of kelp and espresso, old and new twining like lactic filaments in a leather pouch. You head upstairs, laptop buzzing with notes. Tomorrow's lab will decode genes. Tomorrow's chefs will remix tradition. But tonight, you exhale sour-sweet satisfaction. The line between archaeology and kitchen, myth and microbiology, proves as porous as a well-smoked puffin belly. And you're the lucky taster straddling it all. You ride the airport shuttle past snow-dusted lava fields that blur by like charcoal sketches, nursing a stainless steel travel mug filled with the museum chef's final puffin oak blend. Each sip leaves a faint smoky halo on your breath. The other passengers glance over, sniff and shrug. Reykjavik has many eccentric coffees. You close your eyes, replaying the cliff winds, guano slicks and midnight sagas that stitched months of history into your muscles. Joke 1 taps your shoulder. TSA may wonder why your carry-on smells like fermented campfire, but at least puffin pouches don't count as liquids. Technically, they're artisanal luggage. The shuttle stops at Keflavik, and you join the check-in queue beneath fluorescent lights that feel harsher than Icelandic gale. You exhale, the tang still clings, reminding you that survival sometimes tastes like sour hope and seabird leather. Mainstream historical fact flickers across your mind. Modern Iceland's dairy industry still produces sky by the ton, yet puffin storage vanished by the 1700s as barrels and later tin cans replaced biology. But the microbial descendants of cliff-caught cream endure in every cultured spoonful sold worldwide. Security lane beckons. You remove belt and shoes, placing them beside a small glass vial of freeze-dried medieval Lactococcus, gifted by the doctoral student. A tiny time capsule of saga science. The guard raises an eyebrow. You explain it's cheese starter. She nods, perhaps considering her own fridge's yogurt tub as distant cousin. Historians still argue whether reviving antique microbes risks romanticizing the hardship they once cushioned or offers edible homage to resilience. Either way, you cradle the vial like a hush-quiet saga verse. On the concourse, gift shops hawk plush puffins, volcanic salt, and jars labeled smoked buttermilk, salted caramel. You grin. Flavor fusion marches on. Quirky tidbit pops up. A trendy eatery here now serves air-fermented latte, foamed with nitrogen and puffin whey powder. Influencers swear it boosts gut flora and Instagram likes. You snap a photo for the farm wife's ledger, imagining her laughter. Milk once taxed by chieftains now tweets at tourists. Joke 2 smirks. If only those levy men knew their pouches would reincarnate as airport lattes. Boarding begins. As you settle into your seat, the cabin air smells of recycled coffee, but your memory rewinds to kelp smoke, dung fires, and Angelica-scented curds snapping between saga verses. You jot notes. Flavor diversity thrives on container diversity. Ritual, quality control. Sneeze etiquette prevents Sprite sabotage. The flight attendant offers Icelandic chocolate. You trade a lick for your remaining sip of puffin oat brew. She sips, eyebrows lifting at the tang, then chuckles. Tastes like my grandmother's skyer back in Akureyri. Shared heritage in a gulp. The plane lifts over graphite waves. Through the window, cliffs shrink, and you imagine invisible pits below, pouches still fizzing centuries later in microbial dreams. You open an in-flight magazine to an article on lab-grown dairy cell cultures, copy-pasted into stainless bioreactors. Progress loops again. Yet you sense that no algorithm can replicate the gust of Atlantic wind, the crackle of sheep dung smoke, the hush after a pop when whey meets fire. Joke 3 sighs. Good luck coding elf approval into a fermentation app. Somewhere over Greenland, engines hum. Rhythm. You tuck the vial of ancient cultures into your pocket, vowing to revive them in a home kitchen experiment, perhaps smoked oat milk inoculated with saga microbes. Historians still argue whether culinary archaeology risks fashion over fidelity, but tasting history beats reading footnotes when midnight cravings strike. Descent begins. City lights web the dark like luminous runes. You step into modern arrivals hall, automatic doors swooshing instead of turf doors creaking. The sour smoky ghost on your breath fades, mingling with espresso steam and taxi exhaust. Yet the lesson lingers. Scarcity breeds creativity. Ritual guards quality. Flavor remembers containers. You whisper thanks till Mjolk of Fjordur to puffins, cows, monks, elves and microbes. Improbable collaborators in the long play of staying fed. Outside, a cold breeze lacks kelp tang, but you detect hints of asphalt and upcoming work emails. Responsibility returns, but so does a quiet grin. In your backpack waits a sachet of dried Angelica, a strip of smoked kelp, and maybe, just maybe, a cleaned cod bladder sealed in plastic for future tests. Some solutions look odd until winter snarls, then odd tastes like survival. You hail a cab, sliding into synthetic seats. Seabird soured breath finally yielding to peppermint gum. But deep in memory's root cellar, pouches still hum, milk still transforms, and stories still spiral sunwise around ancient hearths. Proof that even leather bellies and oak barrels can cradle centuries of ingenuity in a single tangy sip. Let the airport bustle fade until it becomes nothing more than a far-off hush. Just a soft, even murmur, like wind slipping between basalt stones. Picture yourself stepping away from the bright fluorescent corridors and into a quiet twilight meadow. The grass here feels springy underfoot, cool with memory of snow, yet touched by the promise of dawn. Breathe in slowly. You might notice the faintest wisp of smoke, the gentlest flicker of salt, a whisper of tang that recalls puffin pouch buttermilk cooling beside a turf wall. Exhale, and feel that memory drift off like vapor, carrying the day's weight with it. Another breath. Your shoulders loosen, unclasping the knots formed by climbing cliffs, hauling barrels, deciphering lab prints. Each muscle lengthens, sinking into a warm, steady calm, as though a wool cloak settles across your back. In the near distance, you can almost hear the muted pop of a fermentation bubble, the tiniest friendly sigh from an underground pouch reminding you that good work continues even while you rest. Those invisible microbes are keeping watch, turning milk to safety, toil to comfort. You can trust them to their quiet alchemy. Now allow the colors around you to dim. Meadow greens soften to moss gray, sky blues melt into gentle pearl, and everything sharp folds into velvet edges. Thoughts slow like snowflakes finding their final place on still water. If any stray worry wanders in, a quota unpaid, a sneeze unsneezed, let it float beyond the horizon, where sagas store their unspoken verses. One last breath, deep and unhurried. Feel sleep rise like warm whey, buoying you effortlessly. The world narrows to a single soothing note, steady, round, and perfectly quiet. You are safe. You are carried. Drift, and let the night complete its gentle fermentation.